Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 6 questions in less than 9 minutes because leaders know how to be concise. So with that, we will get started. First question, in a few sentences, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you, Sean, for having me. My name is Scott Eck. I'm the president and CEO of Leadership Masters. Leadership Masters is a premier leadership development organization. We work primarily with Fortune 100 companies globally. We have teams in New York, St. Louis, Los Angeles, and in London. And all of the leadership competencies, skill sets, behaviors that we teach through theatrical means. We have leadership theater events. We have interactive seminars. We have interactive workshops, very hands-on, a lot of role play, a lot of scenario-based training. And we've been having fun with our teams and presenting to executive teams now for 33 years. It was on February 10th was our 33rd anniversary, despite the fact that I'm still just 41.
Well, I love your perspective on using the acting and the role play. I think that's fantastic. So thank you.
Yeah.
Question number 2, what's the best thing about working with the team?
That was the hardest question. When you briefed me on what the questions were going to be, there's so many great things that I find working with the team. I was raised on teams. I was raised in teams. I was raised on a dairy farm in upstate New York. And working on a farm is all team-based. I was an altar boy. That's team-based. I was on all the sports teams, even though I wasn't one of the ones that were first picked, if you will. But the teams were always exciting to me growing up, and they stayed exciting to me through my college years and my postgraduate years and into my first career, which was as an actor. And I was primarily a stage and television actor, and that's all about teams. And then as I morphed into leadership development, then of course, that's just team focused at all times. The best thing for me when it comes to working with my teams, and I like to think that I work with the best people on the planet, the best thing is that, to me, it's a shared experience. You can feel a certain amount of pride and self-esteem for your individual accomplishments, but when you accomplish something as a team, usually you're accomplishing much, much more. And because it's a shared experience, the meaning is so much deeper that you're able to assign to that accomplishment. Not only that, you can take risks in a team. You can take the kind of risks that you might be too fearful to take as an individual. As an individual, we're always afraid of failure, rejection, coming up short, being exposed as a fraud. But in teams, you can kind of put those fears aside, and you can really roll the dice and try things that you wouldn't normally try on an individual level. So to me, working with teams is a freeing experience. It's a roll the dice, let's try something new, let's push ourselves further than we would push ourselves as individual kind of thing. And I just find that I've always grown more exponentially whenever I was part of a team than if I was working on something on my own.
Those are great insights. Thank you for sharing those. I love those discussions about taking better risks or more risks or larger risks, whatever it is. I think that I completely agree. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
Question number 3. I hear
Yeah.
from other leaders of teams that it can be a challenge to get team members engaged. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is what we hear from almost all of our Fortune 100 clients is the problem with team engagement. And Sean, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most of the folks that work with Leadership Masters, there's a number of factors that contribute to the lack of team engagement. I think what we're seeing today in the external environment, Sean, is a great deal of uncertainty, especially now living through COVID-19. There is more uncertainty in the external environment now than there ever was. And whenever there's an imbalance of uncertainty versus certainty, people will become defensive. They'll withdraw into themselves because they trust themselves and their beliefs more than they trust what's happening in the external environment. When you combine COVID-19 to the lack of trust in our global institutions, lack of trust in our financial institutions, lack of trust in our information these days, lack of trust in experts, so to speak. When there's a lack of trust, when there's so much uncertainty, plus that when you have a global health threat like COVID-19, people are going to be very hesitant to engage fully. They're going to wait and see what the environment is, what the obstacles are, what the challenges are, and then what the possible the rewards are. It's always a risk-reward situation when it comes to human beings. So getting team members engaged today is a multi-edged sword when it comes to how much uncertainty there is. So I think the responsibility of leadership, whenever uncertainty dominates the environment, I think it's the responsibility of leadership to be the voice of certainty, to provide as much accurate information, science, facts, data that's truthful as is possible in order to create the kind of trust or certainty that will then balance out some of that uncertainty. And that's going to be hard because in addition to the lack of trust that we have in global leadership, global institutions, and all the things I mentioned earlier, we now also have the uncertainty of that health crisis. So when we go back to work, it's going to be a completely different feel for most people, Sean. They're not going to jump right back in, and they're not going to get right back into rhythm. There's going to be a kind of arm's length energy when people go back to work, even when they go back to restaurants, when they go back to their lives as they were before. It's not going to be like it was before. This is going to change the energy of everything, much as 9/11 did for this country and really for most countries around the world. That was a long-winded to a very simple question, but to me, there's so many facets. There's a lot of complexity around team engagement when it comes to both the external environments that we deal with and the internal environments in our organizations, in our communities, in our families, in our church communities. There's so much uncertainty in those rock solid in the past, those certain environments. Now we've got uncertainty there as well. So engagement's going to be hard for individuals, teams, groups, units, organizations. Everybody's going to have trouble. There's going to be not a spinning of the wheels. It's just going to be a kind of a stop and start engagement until we figure out what this new rhythm is.
Great insights, and I completely agree that engagement is a very complicated topic, and certainly we won't cover everything in a single podcast. But it's very interesting to all the different complexities. People are different, teams are different, companies are different, leaders are different. You have a lot of differences out there that drive the complexities of engagement. So thank you for sharing that. It's great insights. The fourth question: what other piece of advice would you give to leaders of teams?
Whenever there's uncertainty, Sean, there's going to be fear. There's going to be resistance. There's going to be doubt. There's going to be hesitancy from team members. All the uncertainty that I talked about is going to affect team energy. It's going to affect individual energy. It's going to affect all energy. So what I would recommend to leaders, whether they're leaders of their families, their church communities, their larger sphere of influence, their work groups, organizations, I would say make the group at least as important, if not more important than the actual objective. Going back to work, we're going to have to take care of each other first before we get onto the business of creating the future or manufacturing our goods or providing our services. A team approach right now is more important than ever. We've got to let our people know, the people that are on our teams who look to us for leadership, that we are thinking about them, we care about them at least as much as the mission, if not more so that they have that feeling of trust, they have that feeling of certainty, they have that feeling of significance. If you help your people feel significant, Sean, if you help them feel valuable, if you make them feel like they're going to be part of a solution that's bigger than themselves, and you connect them to that objective, you connect them to the team, you connect them to themselves, and they have that certainty that comes from feeling significant and feeling connected, then they're going to be able to deal with any uncertainty.
Mm.
My recommendation to leaders, and you know, I'm not an expert. I just try to see what's going on, sense what the energy is, and then try to influence that energy as much as I possibly can by helping other leaders see what's happening, feel what's happening, listen deeply into the concern of their employees. But if you can make your team members feel that the team itself is just as important or more important than the objective, then your team knows that they're going to be able to grow and contribute while achieving that objective. And then once the objective has been achieved or not, the team will still feel significant, still feel connected. They'll still feel like they can do just about anything. And your team members will go to the wall for you.
Mm.
So it's going to be challenging. You're going to have to be patient. Leaders aren't patient most of the time. They want results now. They live in a quarterly world. My shareholders want my quarterly results to be at least 8% higher than they were the last quarter. So the demands, the pressure is going to be there. They're going to have to try to put that pressure of quarterly performance aside and say, okay, I'll look at what my targets are later. Right now, what does my team need? What does each individual on my team need? How can I help them feel certain, significant, and connected?
Such great insights. You know, you say that you're not an expert, but you certainly give expert advice. So I think that's very good. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Fifth question. What other
Yeah.
successful leaders, such as yourself, have had a positive influence in your life that you would like to recognize?
Oh, God. Sean, I've lived a blessed life. I have. When it comes to people that have influenced me, helped me along, I had never intended even to get into leadership development. I actually started my young professional life as a stage and screen actor, and I was on a television program in the 80s called All My Children, which was an ABC soap opera. And I also was teaching an improvisation class, actually 3 classes in New York City, a beginner's class, intermediate, and a master class of improvisation. And I was writing plays, and 2 plays that I wrote were running in New York simultaneously. And a gentleman from General Electric who ran their leadership development facility in Crotonville, New York, happened to see both plays in New York within 2 weeks' time. And that was in 1986. He simply called me up on the phone. He looked me up in the phone book. That's how old I am, Sean. He looked me up in the phone book and said, I just saw these 2 plays. Did you write them both? I said, yes. He said, do you think you could write leadership development programs based on theater for the General Electric Company? Because I was a college educated, intelligent man, I said, I don't know. I don't know. So he kind of showed me what he wanted. I gave it a shot. I crossed my fingers. And 33 years later, I'm delivering theater-based leadership development programs to the most discerning audience on the planet. That's the Fortune 100 companies that are located around the world. So that man, whose name is Stephen Mercer, who was the vice president of executive education at General Electric at the time, introduced me to a number of clients and people around the world, some of the greatest leaders in the world I've met and worked with. And so I've been blessed. But that gentleman, Stephen Mercer, started me on that road. Before that, I had extraordinary teachers, extraordinary people helping me to understand really the nuances of the human condition, what happens to energy in the environment, how it changes people's behaviors, what fear can do, what love can do, what trust can do. So as far as people influencing me, I've had the greatest leaders in my life, Sean. So I believe in teams, I believe in leadership, and I believe in leadership within teams.
Wow, what a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, my usual final question is to tell us about your first job. Do you consider that acting opportunity your first job, or do you have another one that you'd prefer to share?
Well, when I was 12 years old, I worked, obviously it was illegal to work in those days, in the early 70s or late 60s, early 70s, it was illegal to work. So I worked as a caddy at the local golf course. And as a 12-year-old, I was excited to actually be making money. But the problem was that I was a very thin and kind of frail young man. And some of those golf bags that I had to carry around on my shoulder were extraordinarily heavy. And the two heaviest golf bags at the Shawangunk Golf Course, there's a name for you, Sean, the Shawangunk Golf Course in Ellenville, New York, which is where I was born and raised. The two heaviest golf bags belonged to my two uncles, my Uncle Dick and my Uncle Frank. And so anytime they came to the golf course, guess who they asked to be their caddy? Well, after 18 holes, I would just crawl home. I would be an absolute destroyed, just a bubbling mass of burnt out flesh. And so I had to quit that job at the end of my first summer because there was just nothing left of me. I go 18 holes with Uncle Dick's bag. He had 500 golf balls, 6 different drivers, 14 different putters, a couple of anvils. I was just crazy. So Uncle Dick said he was going to go 18. I would just, want to drive steel spikes into my eyes. So that was only one summer. After that, I said, you know what? Let me find something easier that I can do that's illegal. So there you go. All that great leadership stuff followed by a confession of illegality at the age of 12.
Oh, I love it.
Does it negate everything that came before, Sean?
No, because you were 12.
Legitimate in your eyes.
No, this is perfect because this is why I asked the question, because I always love to hear kind of almost like the origin story. Where did it all start for this person and what did they learn? So I love it. Thank you. This has been so much fun, Scott. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing all of your great experiences. How can people find you?
Thank you, Sean. The name of the company is Leadership Masters. If you'd like to just take a look at us website-wise, it's leadership-masters.com. I also have a book that I wrote called The Status Solution, which is really a lot about what I talked about earlier, and a team book that I wrote called 29 Best Practices of Global Team Dynamics. But leadership-masters.com, you can certainly reach us and look at all of the fabulous things that our teams are doing all over the world. It's an honor for us to be able to do them. It's a joy for us to be able to help people. And Sean, it was a joy and a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. Thanks for the laughter, the great questions when it comes to team dynamics and how really important teams are to all of us as we move forward through this crisis in order to meet our next crisis and then our next fold of the future. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It was a privilege to have you on. You're very gracious, but thank you so much, Scott. This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, you can find us on LinkedIn by going to Blue Sky Business Consulting. Have a great day.